Chapter 1. Childhood Bond Obsession. The first time Caius Valerian saw Alder Caliph, he was 5 years old, wrapped in fine silks and adorned with a princely golden circlet, watching from the high palace walls as the noble Alpha families presented their heirs before the royal court. The moment Alder stepped forward, barefoot with wild silver hair and eyes that burned like embers, Caius knew. He would belong to him. Even as a child, Caius was relentless in his claim. Wherever Alder went, Caius followed. When other noble children tried to befriend Alder, Caius would pull him away, whispering possessive words in his ear. "You don't need them. You have me." When a young noble girl tried to kiss Alder at a court festival, Caius shoved her into the palace fountain, standing protectively in front of Alder with a fierce glare. "I'll be your mate one day," Caius had declared, gripping Alder's wrist tightly. "You'll be my husband and the mother of my future heirs." Alder had only laughed, ruffling Caius's hair as though humoring a younger sibling. "You're just a spoiled prince, Kai. You don't know what you're saying." But Caius knew. He always knew. As the years passed, Alder grew into a formidable warrior. By 16, he was leading palace guards. By 20, he had become the youngest general in history, carving his name into the battlefield with blood and steel. And Caius? He ascended the throne, crowned emperor of the Valerian Empire before he had even reached 21. Despite their titles, they remained close. Alder would kneel before Caius in the grand throne room, addressing him as His Majesty, but the moment they were alone, he would smirk and say, "Still the same stubborn brat, aren't you, Kai?" But what Alder never noticed, what he chose to ignore, was the way Caius watched him. The way his hands clenched whenever someone stood too close to Alder. The way his voice darkened whenever Alder spoke of companionship, of courtly proposals and political marriages. Caius had tolerated Alder's obliviousness when they were children. But now, he was no longer a boy. He was the emperor, and an emperor always got what he wanted. And he wanted Alder. Chapter 2. A Forbidden Proposal. The grand halls of the imperial palace were eerily silent as Emperor Caius Valerian stood before his throne, his golden eyes locked onto the man kneeling before him. The flickering torchlight cast long shadows over Alder Calith's form. The Alpha general clad in his battle-worn armor, fresh from yet another victorious campaign. Caius had waited years for this moment. With a measured breath, he finally spoke. "Alder, I have made my decision." Alder glanced up, his silver eyes sharp and unwavering. "Your Majesty?" Caius stepped forward, descending the marble stairs until he stood before the man who had been his shadow for years. "I want you as my mate, Alder, as my husband. You will bear my heirs and stand beside me as my consort." Silence. Alder's entire body tensed as if he had been struck. Then he exhaled sharply, a humorless, disbelieving laugh escaping his lips. "You can't be serious." Caius's jaw tightened. "I have never been more serious in my life." Alder stood, his posture rigid. "No." Caius's breath hitched. "No? I will not submit to you," Alder said coldly. "I am an alpha, Caius. I will never allow myself to be bonded, not even to you." The words cut deeper than any blade. Caius had known Alder would resist, but hearing it aloud, hearing the finality in Alder's voice was unbearable. "Do you think this is a request?" Caius's voice was dangerously low, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "You belong to me, Alder. You always have." Alder's gaze darkened. "I belong to no one." A long silence stretched between them. The air was thick with unspoken emotions. Anger, heartbreak, and something raw that neither of them dared name. For the first time in his life, Caius felt helpless. He could have commanded Alder, forced him into submission with his royal decree, but he wanted Alder to choose him, to accept him willingly. Caius swallowed back the burning ache in his throat. "Very well," he finally said, voice quieter now. "Go then, if that is your choice." Alder hesitated. He had expected fury, retribution, perhaps even an ultimatum. But not this. Not surrender. Still, he didn't waver. He turned on his heel, striding toward the palace doors without looking back. Caius watched him go, his nails digging into his palm. For now, he thought. But one day, Alder would be his, no matter what it took. Chapter 3. Unavoidable circumstances, forced bonding. The kingdom burned. Caius stood on the palace balcony, his golden eyes fixated on the distant horizon, where the crimson glow of flames painted the night sky. The rebellion had struck harder than expected, their forces breaching the western border, leaving countless dead in their wake. But none of it mattered to him. Not the war, not the politics, nothing except the blood-soaked body of the man lying in the imperial chamber. Alder Calith, his indomitable general, his stubborn alpha, his everything, had been brought back to the palace barely clinging to life. Caius had watched in cold fury as the physicians tried to mend him, but nothing worked. The wound, deep, festering with the venom of enemy weapons, was beyond normal healing. Death was creeping upon Alder, stealing him away inch by inch, and for the first time in his reign, Caius felt helpless. Until a forbidden solution whispered in his mind. The mating bond. An enigma's bond was more than just possession. It was power, a divine connection that could heal, protect, and most of all, bind. If Caius completed the bond, Alder would live. But he wouldn't just be saved. He would be his, forever. There was no hesitation. Caius stepped forward, brushing damp silver strands from Alder's sweat-soaked face. His general, his fierce, untouchable warrior, looked so fragile, so breakable. Lowering himself, Caius pressed a lingering kiss to Alder's lips before trailing down to the vulnerable junction of his throat. His canines lengthened, fangs grazing over fevered skin. "I won't lose you," Caius whispered, voice trembling with desperation. And then he bit. The taste of Alder's blood ignited something primal inside him. A surge of raw power crackled between them, the bond snapping into place like a steel chain. A gasp tore from Alder's lips, his unconscious body arching as their souls entwined. But the bond wasn't complete, not yet. Caius climbed over him, hands trembling as he undid the clasps of Alder's ruined armor. He had to do this. The ritual demanded full consummation, body and soul, sealed by love and flesh. Alder's fevered body clenched around him as Caius claimed him, whispering apologies, love, and devotion between desperate kisses. He felt the bond tightening, securing Alder in a way that could never be undone. When it was over, Caius held Alder close, his lips pressing over the newly formed mating mark on Alder's throat. The man who had once refused to submit was now bound to him in the most permanent way. Forever. 1 month later. Alder's breath came in sharp gasps as he stood in front of the mirror, his trembling hands pressed against his stomach. His heart pounded, his mind reeling with disbelief. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. And yet, the undeniable proof was there. His scent had changed. His body felt different, and the healer's words echoed in his mind. He was pregnant. Alder clenched his fists, rage boiling beneath his skin. He had refused to submit. He had rejected Caius. And yet, not only had Caius forced the bond upon him, but now he was carrying his child. The doors to his chamber creaked open, and Alder turned sharply to find Caius standing there, golden eyes dark with unreadable emotions. "You knew." Alder's voice was deadly quiet. Caius didn't deny it. He stepped forward, expression soft yet unwavering. "I did what I had to do." Alder's fingers curled into his palms, nails biting into his skin. "You used me. You took away my choice. I saved you," Caius interrupted, his voice laced with something between desperation and possession. "You would have died, Alder. I couldn't let that happen." Alder's chest heaved, emotions warring within him. He wanted to hate Caius, to despise him for what he had done. But beneath his fury, beneath his outrage, he could feel it, the bond. It tied him to Caius, whispering love and obsession into every corner of his soul. He could feel Caius's emotions, the desperation, the fear, the utter need to keep him close. And worst of all, his own body responded to it. He was trapped. Forever. And now, he was carrying the heir to the empire. Chapter 4. Rejection, Resistance. The imperial palace had never been so lavishly decorated. Golden banners draped from towering marble columns, and the scent of fresh roses filled the air. Every noble, lord, and dignitary from across the empire had gathered for the grand event, the wedding of Emperor Caius Valerian and General Alder Caliph. But despite the splendor, despite the joyous cheers of the people, one man stood at the altar with a heart of stone. Alder? Dressed in royal white and gold, he stood beside Caius, his jaw clenched as the high priest recited the sacred vows. The heavy ceremonial crown weighed on his head, but not nearly as much as the suffocating presence of the man beside him, the man who had forced him into this. Caius looked radiant, golden eyes alight with satisfaction, a victorious smile playing at his lips as he slipped the imperial ring onto Alder's finger. "From this day forward," Caius whispered, voice filled with emotion, "you are mine, Alder. In name, in soul, in body." Alder wanted to snatch his hand away, but he couldn't, not with the bond humming between them, the invisible chains binding him to this fate. So instead, he forced his lips into a thin line, refusing to meet Caius's gaze. The cheers erupted, rose petals rained upon them, and the kingdom rejoiced. The emperor had his beloved. The empire had its royal consort, but the war between them was far from over. Resistance. From the moment the wedding ended, Alder refused to yield. He avoided Caius at every turn, slipping through palace corridors like a ghost, finding excuses to be elsewhere whenever the emperor approached. He refused to share a bed, locking himself in the adjoining chamber despite knowing the bond would punish him for it. But the worst part? His body betrayed him. Every night away from Caius left him weak. His limbs ached. His breath came in shallow gasps, and an unbearable cold crept into his bones. The bond demanded he be near his mate. It wasn't just emotional, it was physical, an ache that only Caius's presence could soothe. Still, Alder fought. Even when dizziness forced him to lean against walls, even when his hands trembled from exhaustion, even when he woke in the night gasping from a pain he refused to acknowledge, he fought. Until he tried to escape. The plan was simple: a hidden tunnel beneath the palace walls, a horse waiting in the northern forest. He would flee to the distant provinces, to the mountains where Caius's reach could not follow. But the moment he stepped beyond the palace gates, agony struck. Alder collapsed onto the cobblestone path, clutching his chest as a searing pain lashed through his soul. It was unbearable. 1,000 knives twisting inside him, a suffocating force dragging him back. His vision blurred. Strong arms caught him before he hit the ground. And then, a familiar voice, low and unyielding, whispered against his ear. "You cannot run from me, Alder." The Emperor's authority. When Alder woke, he was in their shared chamber, the silken sheets betraying just how much care had been taken in bringing him back. The scent of Caius filled the room, wrapping around him like a cage. He turned his head, and there he was. Caius sat beside the bed, golden eyes unreadable, his fingers idly tracing the mark on Alder's neck, the mating mark, the proof of his submission. Alder stiffened, trying to move, but the weight of Caius's power pressed down on him like an unshakable force. "You disobeyed me," Caius murmured, his voice dangerously soft. "You nearly killed yourself trying to leave." Alder gritted his teeth. "I would rather die free than live as your prisoner." Caius exhaled sharply, his expression darkening. He reached out, fingers brushing over Alder's stomach, where their child grew. "You would risk our heir's life as well?" Alder flinched. His hands instinctively covered his stomach, protectiveness overriding his fury. Caius saw it, and a slow, knowing smirk curled on his lips. "You may resist me, love," Caius said, leaning in, his breath warm against Alder's ear. "But this bond, this life inside you, it binds you to me in ways you cannot escape." Alder turned his face away, refusing to meet Caius's gaze. But Caius wasn't done. He reached into his robe, pulling out a small, ornate box. With deliberate care, he opened it. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet encrusted with blue gemstones. "For you," Caius said simply, holding it out. Alder frowned. "Another gift?" Caius's lips quirked. "A reminder of what you are, who you belong to." Alder swallowed hard, glaring at him. "I will never love you." Caius only smiled. "You don't have to, not yet." The word sent a chill down Alder's spine. Because deep down, in the very bond he refused to acknowledge, he knew the truth. No matter how much he fought, Caius would never let him go. Chapter 5. Fights, Betrayal, Acceptance. The rebellion had never been truly defeated. That day on the battlefield, they had fled, retreating into the shadows, licking their wounds, but they had not given up. And now, as the palace walls trembled under the force of their assault, the war that had never truly ended had returned. With a vengeance. The battle for the Empire. The scent of blood and smoke thickened the air as Alder stood beside Caius on the palace balcony, watching the enemy forces storm through the outer gates. "They're after you," Caius said grimly, his golden eyes scanning the battlefield. "They know you carry the air." Alder's fist tightened around the hilt of his sword. "Then let them come." Side by side they fought. Alder, the Empire's strongest general, his sword a blur of silver as he cut through the rebels. Caius, the mighty emperor, wielding his power with ruthless efficiency, fire and steel, blood and fury. Together, they were unstoppable. But the enemy had planned well. A trap. A moment of weakness. And before Alder could react, a sharp pain erupted at the back of his head. Darkness swallowed him whole. The Emperor's wrath. When Alder awoke, he was bound. Chains held his wrists, his ankles. He was in a dimly lit chamber, the air thick with damp stone and the distant sounds of battle. The rebel leader, a scarred man with cruel eyes, loomed over him. "The Emperor will come for you," the man sneered. "And when he does, we will rip his empire from his hands." His gaze flickered to Alder's stomach. "And perhaps we'll take the air while we're at it." Alder spat blood at his feet. "You won't live long enough to try." The door burst open. A gust of heat flooded the chamber. And then, fire. Caius stood at the entrance, his cloak billowing behind him, his golden eyes burning with something far more dangerous than rage. It was obsession. Possession. He had not come to negotiate. He had come to burn. Screams filled the air as flames engulfed the rebel forces. Caius moved through them like a god of destruction, his sword slicing through flesh, his power scorching the earth. And when he reached Alder, the flames died down, but the fire in his eyes did not. Caius knelt before him, his hands trembling as he broke the chains. His fingers ghosted over Alder's bruised wrists, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like he might shatter. "You are mine," he murmured, voice low, raw, dangerous. "No one takes what is mine." Alder should have been angry. He should have resented the possessiveness in Caius's voice. But instead, something inside him cracked. This wasn't just obsession. This wasn't about control. Caius had risked everything, his throne, his empire, his life. Not for power, but for him. For them. For the first time, Alder saw the truth. Caius didn't just want him. He loved him. And in that moment, Alder knew. Fighting the bond was useless. Fighting Caius was useless. Because despite everything, despite the forced bond, despite the past, he belonged to Caius. Just as Caius had always belonged to him. Acceptance. The rebellion was crushed. The empire was secure. And Alder? Alder had stopped running. His body had softened with pregnancy, his hands instinctively resting over his growing stomach. The child within him was a constant reminder of everything that had happened, everything that had changed. But now, instead of fear, he felt warmth. Caius never left his side, not for a moment, not ever. And for the first time, Alder didn't push him away. He let Caius hold him at night, Let him press gentle kisses against his temple. Let himself fall into the bond he had resisted for so long. Because despite everything, despite the war, the betrayal, the forced bond, there was love. Twisted, possessive, overwhelming, but love nonetheless. And for the first time since their first meeting in childhood, Alder whispered the words that had once felt impossible. "I love you, Caius." Caius froze. Then slowly he smiled. A smile not of victory, but of something far softer. Of home. "You were always mine, Alder," he murmured, pulling him close, pressing a kiss to his lips. "And now, I am finally yours." Chapter 6. A New Dawn. The Empire was at peace, so the rebellion had been crushed, its leaders executed, and the land, once soaked in blood, now flourished under the reign of Emperor Caius Valerian and his consort, General Alder Calith. But none of that mattered to Caius now. Not as he sat beside Alder, gripping his mate's trembling hand, his golden eyes filled with uncharacteristic fear. "The birth of an heir," Alder screamed. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he gritted his teeth, his entire body racked with pain. Enigma physicians moved quickly around the chamber, murmuring reassurances, but Alder barely heard them. Caius was there, holding his hand, whispering soft praises, his usual composed demeanor completely shattered. "You're almost there, love," Caius murmured, his voice unsteady. "Just a little more." Alder groaned, his grip tightening around Caius's fingers, probably breaking them. "Shut up and let me concentrate." And then a sharp cry filled the air. A moment of stillness. And then a physician placed a tiny, wailing infant into Alder's shaking arms. She was small but strong, her delicate features already resembling both of her parents. A tuft of dark curls framed her face, her tiny fists flailing, demanding attention, demanding love. Alder stared at her, chest heaving, eyes stinging with tears. "An alpha girl, their daughter. She's perfect," Caius whispered, his voice thick with emotion. His fingers trembled as he stroked her tiny cheek. "She's ours." Alder let out a breathless laugh. "She's loud. She takes after you." Alder rolled his eyes, but couldn't stop himself from smiling. He had fought against this, against the bond, against Caius, against fate itself. But now, with their daughter nestled between them, safe, loved, there was nothing left to fight. Embracing love, days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Alder no longer pushed Caius away, no longer resisted the gentle touches, the lingering kisses, the warm embrace of a man who had once been his childhood friend and had now become his everything. They ruled together, not as a forced pair, but as true mates. Alder's sharp intellect balanced Caius's cunning leadership. They were equals, warriors, lovers, bound by fate, by history, by love. The empire flourished under their reign, and their daughter, strong, willful, loved beyond measure, would one day inherit everything they had built. And at night, when the torches dimmed and their daughter slept peacefully, Alder would curl into Caius's arms, resting his head against his mate's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," Alder whispered one evening, his fingers tracing idle patterns over Caius's bare skin. Caius tilted his head, golden eyes searching his. "For what?" "For never giving up on me." Caius's lips curved into a soft smile as he pulled Alder closer, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "You were always mine, Alder," he murmured, "and I was always yours." Alder closed his eyes, a peaceful sigh escaping his lips. For the first time in his life, he was home.